Hey, Wolfies, are you ready for the bite?
I don't give a shit if Pablo Escobar is in the back of that thing. I've still got 20 minutes of music to finish for a very homoerotic scene.
Welcome to Return to Beacon Hills, a Teen Wolf Rewatch podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Calissa Mullis, and I'm joined by
Kate Colvin
and Will Wallace.
Every week, we'll be watching and talking about the hit MTV series one episode at a time. And this week, we're talking about Season 1, Episode 3, Pack Mentality. If you're watching Teen Wolf for the first time and you're worried about spoilers, have no fear. This podcast is broken up into two sections, Alpha and Beta. The Beta section is for first-timers who are just now finding this awesome series and don't want to be spoiled about what's to come. The second section, Alpha, is where we go full spoilers and talk about not just the current episode, but the entire Teen Wolf series as well as its place in the fandom. In the show notes of your podcast app of choice, you'll find time codes for the Alpha and Beta sections. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RTBH Podcast, as well as on Tumblr and TikTok at Return to Beacon Hills. If you'd like to ask us questions or offer suggestions for future topics to discuss, you can email us at returntobeaconhills@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can find us on Patreon at RTBH Podcast. There, our Wolfie patrons will gain access to awesome exclusives like early access to episodes, full moon AMAs, the Beacon Hills Movie Club, where we watch and provide commentary for movies starring the amazing cast of Teen Wolf and featuring the work of our talented crew, as well as guest video interviews and a monthly watch party. So head on over to Patreon/RTBH Podcast and join the pack.
This week's Howl Out goes to Alpha patrons Rachel C. and Kristen Konzelman. Thanks, guys.
This week, we watched Season 1, Episode 3 of Teen Wolf, titled Pack Mentality. It was written by Jeff Flaming and directed by Russell Mulcahy. After having a nightmare about killing Allison on a school bus, Scott comes to believe that he actually did attack someone the night before. Not Allison, but a bus driver. In order to protect Allison, Scott doesn't think he should go on that date that they have planned, which unexpectedly becomes a double date with Jackson and Lydia. So Scott goes to Derek to find out what really happened the night before. Derek tells Scott to go back to the bus and let his heightened werewolf senses pull the memories out of his subconscious. Scott does this and believes that it wasn't he who attacked the man on the bus, but Derek. Since it wasn't Scott, he thinks he's probably safe to go out with Allison after all. But on the date, Jackson tells Scott that he's determined to find out what his secret is. At the same time, Derek visits the man who was attacked on the bus and learns that the man somehow knew the Hale family. Unfortunately, the man dies before he can reveal more. Scott, still believing that Derek killed the man on the bus, confronts Derek and they fight it out at the Hale house. Derek wins the fight and tells Scott he wasn't the one who bit him. It was another werewolf, a type called an alpha. And because the alpha bit him, Scott is now a member of that alpha's pack.
Our favorite quote from this week's episode comes from a conversation between Stiles and Scott, in which Stiles speculates that Scott could have killed and eaten a rabbit the night before rather than killing a person. Scott, who's completely appalled, says, "Raw?" And Stiles says, this is the favorite quote, "No, you stopped to bake it in a little werewolf oven. Yes, raw." And this week's honorable mention is, it's not like there's a lycanthropy for beginners class.
I feel like that sums up the entirety of the first season.
Yes.
Just like Scott's beginning plot.
Absolutely. That'll be the honorable mention for every episode. Because it does seem like this, in the first season, a lot of the storylines are like, God, being a werewolf's hard. Jumping off of our favorite quotes where, Stiles speculates that Scott maybe killed a rabbit the night before, and that explains all the blood on the school bus. This episode opens with a super sexy date between Scott and Allison, where they sneak onto a school bus at night, and they're getting kind of cute and flirty, and, they're making out. But then claws come out, and the fangs come out, and Allison sees him as a werewolf for the first time. And it's very scary, and Scott kind of just goes mad and starts throwing bus benches at her, and he chases after her, and she kicks him back with a lot of force for a teenager. But I mean, as we learn later, she's done gymnastics, so she's got some skills. But then, she races to the front of the bus, and she's got some cuts on her where he was kind of swiping at her legs, and she tries to squeeze out the collapsible door to the bus. But sadly, Scott grabs her and yanks her back in, and he kills her. Very brutal, except he actually didn't, because it was all a dream. that he had the night before. And what we were seeing was Scott explaining it all to Styles. What did y'all think about this opening? I think it's a fun, sexy opening, which, dear listeners, you will learn very quickly that many episodes of Teen Wolf go from super sexy stuff to super scary stuff at like the drop of a hat. Like that's kind of like the bread and butter of this show, where it's like, ooh, sexy characters getting all sexy. Oh my God, there's so many teeth and blood.
Mark me down as scared and horny.
There you go.
It's yeah, they are definitely good at that. I will say, and it is sexy because those characters have chemistry together. But my first thought the first time I watched that scene was, you don't think the school bus is sexy, right? I mean,
it's almost, I mean, it's preferable, I would say, to a locker room.
I heard that a lot of band kids got it on in the back of school buses between trips. But
I'm sure that's true.
I was not in the band.
I heard that
I feel
too.
like that's like a convenience thing, though. That's not because like you're not just like sneaking onto the school bus because it's a sexy place.
Don't judge his fetishes. That's kink shaming.
I'm just saying he's going to get an infection, and it's not of a sexual nature.
So I think you had a small issue with this scene, didn't you, Will?
I did. I think it's a great scene. It's super fun. It's super sexy. It's super scary. But unfortunately, the very last shot of Allison kind of getting thrown against the glass and her face smushing up into it is not scary. It made me laugh when I rewatched it. And it's not just Teen Wolf, like when this happened in this moment, that it's like in anytime I see someone's face like pressed against glass and it's supposed to be scary, it's never scary to me. It's just not scary at all. And it just comes across as funny to me. And I feel like the better way to have gone out for this episode would have been to just have a spray of blood across the glass. What do y'all think? Is that shot kind of weird to y'all? Or is it just
I think you're right about that. And mostly I'm just relieved that the issue you had with that scene was not the Wolfie sideburns that we're introduced to, because I found those delightful. I thought
fun.
that Allison should just be sitting there sort of like just petting the sides of his face.
All right. So Scott's telling Styles about this incident, and Styles is, of course, like, oh, no, nothing happened. It was just a dream. It was a dream. Nothing bad happened at all. And then they walk back outside the school and they see that the cops and CSI folks are swarming a school bus that has been practically painted with blood on the inside. And it's like, oh, shit. Something bad may have happened.
The first Beacon Hills high school crime scene, but not the last.
No. Many, many, many Beacon Hills crime scenes. Also Beacon Hills high school crime scenes. Like, so it's many. Just anything in Beacon Hills. I mean, I feel like by the end of this show, it's just the cops don't even take like caution tape with them, because every place in town just has a roll of caution tape, because I mean, at some point their number is going to come up.
I also feel like the setup of the school, where they enter in what seems to be the front door and then just walk out the other side. I mean, it's just as nonsensical as the rest of Beacon Hills. Like, what is the setup of the school? They
it's just a corridor.
And then just...
That's all it is. It's just a corridor.
So,
okay.
Scott can't find Allison and he thinks she's dead. He freaks out, breaks open a locker with his fist. But Allison is fine, and the locker belongs to Jackson.
Which is hilarious. That is one of the best great. Just pan over jokes ever. And it's really good, especially at the end where just the lock falls off and all this. It's just a super funny moment. It's just great. And then, of course, Scott, kind of looks away from Jackson. He has the most adorable derpy face.
He does. Because I feel like that moment is so... It like takes you back to being a teenager for the sheer like pettiness and childishness, but in a way that's still enjoyable.
Absolutely. No. Absolutely. It's just a wonderful moment. And again, I think we've mentioned this in previous episodes already, but I mean, Teen Wolf has a lot of strengths: the score, the acting, the action, the cinematography. But I also believe that one of the main strengths is just small character moments that just make them completely relatable. Because I mean, obviously the story takes place in a heightened universe and all this, with all these spectacular creatures and romances and all this type of stuff, where everything's kind of turned up to 11. But then you get just these wonderful little moments, like Scott's derpy face. That's just like, oh, that's right. They're human beings. They're just normal, in quotes. Can't see me doing quotes on a podcast, but they're normal. They're normal people. Yeah, it's great. I love it. I don't know. I'm rambling, but I love it. I think it's just fantastic. So
I just love that no one comments on Scott destroying the locker. I know there's a crime scene outside, but still, like, that dude just went like full on demolishing that with his fist. Like, how does no one even like turn their head? And poor Jackson, who I feel like thought this year was going to be great. Another wonderful year for him, being all hot and popular and rich. Then it turns out to be the no good, very bad year for Jackson.
Poor Jackson is not something I ever said through the entirety of watching that show.
No one cares about Jackson.
Well, don't be an asshole, and people will care about you. I mean,
exactly.
It's a very simple formula. I assume. I don't know math, so I mean, I don't know what that formula would be.
Okay, that was pretty good. That's pretty good, actually. That was a pretty artful self-burn, and I give you points for it.
Thank you very much. All right, so after seeing the police and all the forensics people on the bus, Scott and Stiles go to class.
This is our first introduction to Harris, the science teacher, who also seems to be one of the biggest tools at the school.
He's the Professor Snape of Beacon Hills High.
He's just like super done with teaching. I think it has been since day one. We all know that teacher.
He became a teacher, and literally on the first day, he was like, oh, I'm done with this. So, yeah. But if he's the Snape of Beacon Hills High School, does that mean he totally had a thing for Mama McCall at some point?
No.
That's good. So, because Harris is such a tool and clearly doesn't like Scott and Stiles, he separates them in class. And when Scott moves to his new seat, he's right in front of Jackson. And of course, Jackson is leering at him the whole time. I'm assuming not because of the locker, but more because he still believes Scott's up to something. That there's no way in the previous 2 episodes Scott could have become so good at lacrosse so fast without there being some other factor that he doesn't know about.
Which he's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong.
It's not paranoia if you're right.
That's right.
Jackson is right all season. Like, this isn't one of those instances where he just believes something because he's got misinformation or something like that. No, he's right the entire time that Scott is technically cheating, not out of his own volition, but something is going on with him. And Scott's like, nope, nothing's going on. But of course, that's not true.
I don't think we ever get into like the ethics of Scott playing lacrosse. Like, okay, is he going to kill someone's discussed, but not like, should you be playing against other normal teenagers, Scott? Aren't you just cheating?
Right.
Can you just give up?
That's true.
It's like we had talked about the Incredibles thing, how it's like, should you be competing against regular kids who don't have superpowers? That seems unfair.
Seems very unfair.
Thank goodness lacrosse scholarships aren't really a thing, or he could have been depriving someone of one.
That's very true. Very true. So as Jackson is leering dangerously at Scott, someone sees some movement outside the window, and all the kids, they rush to the window, and Scott and everyone else sees the deputies are pushing an unconscious body into an ambulance. And right before it gets in, the guy freaking like wakes up and is screaming from whatever horrible experience he's been through. And Scott freaks out and thinks, I must have attacked this person. It has to have been me. I attacked this guy and almost killed him. And as far as we know, he ain't wrong. So Scott.
But also, did he make out with him beforehand?
Well, I mean, I hope so.
She asks the hard-hitting questions.
Is it getting all sexy and steamy? Anywho.
Yes. Then later in the day, Scott and Stiles go to lunch, and Scott is still very upset at what's happened. And he doesn't.
But then he sees Allison, and it's fine.
Well, I mean,
not really.
That's true. I was going to say, when you have a crush, crushes make everything better, but not murder.
Perked up. They're looking all cutesy at each other.
He does perk up, but he's still like unsure, right, about going on the date.
Yeah, he doesn't know what to do because he's worried about hurting Allison. But then also in that scene, Lydia kind of butts in on everything. Instead of it being a date between Scott and Allison, it's now a double date with Lydia and Jackson, which sounds awful.
It does sound awful.
And, Jackson hates Scott, and Scott doesn't really seem to have an opinion of Jackson other than he's just a dick. So I mean, he doesn't really complain about Jackson a lot.
Which, when it comes to Jackson, isn't really an opinion; it's more just an observation.
That's true. It's like
just like this guy's a dick. It's not an opinion.
Someone's like, oh, hey, is that Jackson? Oh, yeah, there's that dick. It's just, that's just it.
Right.
That's just it. So, and I do find that interesting that Jackson is just an asshole. Like, just your typical bully asshole.
Anyway, I was going to say, and I've been wanting to say, while talking about Jackson, we're going to have a special episode coming up about the Nancy Holder book On Fire. It's a Teen Wolf novel, actually the only one that exists. Yeah, so On Fire starts immediately after the events of The Tell. But we actually get a lot of Jackson backstory in that. Jackson's a big focus in the novel. So we can discuss more about his backstory, even if it's not purely canon, right. Recognized canon.
Yeah.
Jeff Davis recognized canon.
Which he called it canon in an interview. It's just later episodes don't support that. But when asked the question, he said yes.
But we do get like a lot of insight into Jackson and his adoption and everything in that novel. So
that's right.
So we're at the lunch, which I was going to say, like, okay, Jackson is an asshole, but I love the eyebrow action he gives Lydia whenever she has like slip up of her genius where she says, cougar is a mountain lion. And then he just
isn't it?
And then, she has to add that to be like, what? But he gives her just some great eyebrow action whenever he's like, wait, you know that?
The show has a lot of very expressive eyebrows.
They do.
That's accurate. That's very accurate. We do eyebrow casting. So it's fantastic. So, but also in this episode, or not in this episode, also in this scene, it feels like Stiles has changed his mind from the previous episodes. What do you think about that? Because at first, in the pilot, Stiles is like, Scott, you are cursed. And in this episode, he's like, Scott, you cannot change your life simply because you're cursed. So it's like, what happened?
I don't feel like there were any events that actually changed his thoughts on this. I feel like it's kind of just classic television writing where a character will change their opinions just for the need of the story. And this one, Scott needs someone to push him to go ahead and go on the date and tell him, hey, it's okay.
Or Stiles is just such a good friend. He's living vicariously through Scott. And the fact that he's basically got a girlfriend now and Stiles doesn't. So he's like, you need to tell me everything. So go on this date and that's going to be awesome. You got to tell me everything. But also, I think it's probably more what Calissa said.
I agree with Calissa. It didn't feel like there was a specific event that made Stiles kind of go, oh no, you can't rearrange your whole life because of this life-altering thing that happened to you. It's more like in the first couple of episodes, it made sense that Scott wasn't really taking the changes seriously. He wanted to keep doing the things that he wanted to do as a teenage boy. He wanted to go on dates. He wanted to go to parties. He wanted to play on the lacrosse team. And Stiles was kind of trying to be a little bit of a mitigating factor, saying, or maybe you make the decision that's least likely to end in you murdering someone. And then in this episode, Scott finally starts taking it more seriously because he thinks he might have actually murdered someone. And the story needs him to go on the date. And so Stiles kind of jumps to the other shoulder, right? And becomes the devil whispering in his ear instead of the angel. Yeah, I think it's more of that reasoning.
Gotcha. No, I think you are 100% correct.
I love Stiles in this scene. This might actually be one of my favorite Stiles scenes in the first season because I just didn't even know there was such a sarcastic way to eat one's lunch. Like, the drinking of the water, the eating of the fry. He just has such like sassy attitude while he's doing it and judging everything that's happening here.
Yes, he does. And you're right. He doesn't even have to say a word. And also, I feel like there's such awkward bi energy to Stiles that I really identify with, right? You have him like sitting at the lunch table. He turns to one side. There's a hot girl. He's flustered and doesn't know what to do. He turns to the other side. There's a hot guy. It's Danny. He's flustered and doesn't know what to do. I identify with this on a deep cellular level.
It's great. And yeah, Dylan O'Brien is just terrific in this scene.
And then he sort of underscores that by, after the scene is over and they're walking in the hall, trying to get Scott to answer him about whether he's attractive to gay guys.
I know Scott has a lot of issues going on right now, but he should have answered Styles.
The answer is yes. I've been on the internet, so I can actually go ahead and validate that for Styles. 10 years later, that little puzzle has finally been solved. But that's also, I feel like the cafeteria scene does kind of showcase Jackson's complete lack of empathy for other people, because they're trying to have a semi-serious discussion about a bus driver that was brutally attacked, and he's like, "Oh, I hate this conversation."
He says he's like probably a homeless tweaker who's going to die anyway.
Oh my God, that's right. I forgot the actual line of dialogue. Thank you.
I'm going to play it right now.
It was somehow worse than I remembered.
They break out their like old school like Sony Ericsson to like show the clip.
So, Kate, you mentioned in this scene where Lydia kind of hides her knowledge. Why do you think she's doing that? I mean, because this is like our second example of Lydia clearly being smart. Why do you think she's playing that off? And even Allison mentions it later on in this episode. You know, why is she hiding? I mean, why would you hide that?
I think Lydia thinks very strategically. I think she thinks in terms of what is going to get me ahead. And I think, unfortunately, her concept of what's going to get her ahead is attaching herself to a man who's going to get ahead. She sincerely thinks that is actually her best bet. I think she really believes that at this point in the show. Yeah. I think later she comes to have enough confidence in herself that she thinks that she can get where she wants to go on her own merits. I mean, she knows that she's smart, but I think that she thinks that she can't get what she wants by being smart.
Okay. That's
or at least not by being openly smart. Yeah. And I think Beacon Hills is a place where homophobia doesn't exist. I don't think it's a place where sexism doesn't exist. I think it's just the real world in that regard.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that she thinks like no one likes a know-it-all. I think that's what she thinks.
Okay.
I mean, how often do guys get called know-it-alls compared to girls? Really?
I guess never. Probably.
Almost never.
Yeah.
It's just... It's like one of those secretly gendered terms where there's like nothing gendered about the words themselves, but it's like still just kind of only applied to girls. And I feel like that's probably what it was. I feel like baby Lydia was also a genius.
Right.
And she probably got called a know-it-all a bunch. And then she was like, and she learned because she's smart. And she came to a logical conclusion, right? She deduced, okay, this is not the way to get ahead. People are not going to respect me because I know what I'm talking about. Right. They're going to respect me when I attach myself to someone who demands respect. And that person is not me.
Gotcha. Well, it's very sad that she believes that, unfortunately. And I look forward to watching this character grow, and hopefully she breaks out of that. That would be great. Well,
and that's something we'll see a little bit in The Tell, right? When one of her teachers is telling her parents, she's a genius. I think she might be a genius. I'd like to get her IQ tested. And her parents are so busy like bickering and talking about how, oh, you know, we probably like made a mistake by asking her to choose who she wants to live with or whatever. They're giving themselves a lot of credit for influencing her life when clearly they're pretty self-obsessed.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Lydia's dealing with a lot of things that they have no idea about because by that time she's seen some shit.
That's right. By that point, the video store's already happened. That's that episode, right? That's that teaser of that episode. So, yeah.
So, yeah, I think that, like, the way her parents talk about her kind of reinforces that theory about why she hides her intelligence.
That makes sense. And after school, Scott goes to work at the Beacon Hills Animal Clinic where we meet his boss for the first time, Deaton, played by Seth Gilliam. And at work, they have a visit from Sheriff Stilinski and
looking like a badass, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. That's just the thing. Like that, you know, Scott rolls into work and he's like, oh God, I'm sorry I'm late. And Deaton's like, calm down, buddy. And then, you know, Scott's getting ready and he sees, you know, Sheriff Stilinski kind of slide into frame outside this door. He looks like a total badass. Like just
and he says part of a line and like takes his sunglasses off. I mean, really just nails every bit of that entrance.
He David Caruso's the hell out of it. So yeah. But I don't know about y'all. I mean, y'all are so much younger than I am. Y'all were probably 3 or 4 when this movie came out. But in 1995, a movie called Mortal Kombat came out.
I was 5.
My God.
How old were you, Will?
I was 38, okay?
Grandpa Will.
Grandpa Will. Thank God I just look younger than I am. But no, and Lyndon Ashby is in Mortal Kombat. He plays Johnny Cage. And so anytime I see Lyndon Ashby wearing sunglasses, I'm like, Johnny Cage has arrived. And in that scene, when he just kind of like rolls up and, he's outside the door, he looks just like Johnny Cage from that movie, and it always makes me so happy. And Scott sees him looking like a total badass. He's like, oh my God, the jig is up. Somehow something's been figured out, and Stilinski's here for me. But of course, Stilinski comes in. He's got an adorable dog with him. He's got like a little bandage on his paw.
That's a professional doggo. That's a canine unit.
It's a canine unit doggo.
That doggo has been to police academy. That doggo has passed the exams. That doggo is.
Do you think those exams were rough?
Oh,
hey, that's pretty good.
Thank you. But Stilinski isn't there for Scott. He's there to ask Deaton for, I guess, a professional courtesy, because apparently they're not getting much information on what possibly attacked the bus driver. And so he asked Deaton to just kind of give him his honest opinion about it. And, Deaton says that he's not really much of an expert, although he is a veterinarian.
Okay.
I think he means in terms of forensics.
Yes. Don't know what.
Well, I mean,
people don't come in with animal bites. Like if you get bit by like anything, you're not going to go. Yeah, you're not going to go to the vet and say, "Hey,
that's true.
What animal was this?" No,
true.
You're going to go to the doctor.
That's true. But Deaton looks over the photographs of the wounds on the bus driver, and he suggests that maybe it's a mountain lion, but also it could have been a wolf. Scott mentions that there haven't been any wolves in California for a long time, and
that's because Styles gave him that information.
Yes, that's because
right.
Styles gave you that information 2 episodes ago. But, Deaton agrees with him that there aren't any known wolves in California, but those animals are migratory, and, they can be drawn to different places, even other states, by prey or memories, which it seems to be a shock to Scott, but I'm not really sure why, because, everyone knows animals have memories.
I know, that was so funny.
Especially
He's
like dogs.
Wait, animals have memories? I was like, yes, girl,
have you never had
a pet?
The goldfish when I flushed it down the toilet.
Oh no. Sad. Oh my God. But I'm
just trying to give Scott a tragic backstory to keep up with Jackson's tragic backstory.
Oh,
he does have a tragic backstory. We'll get to it later.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. But, yes, of course, dogs and theoretically their cousins wolves have memories. Haven't you ever trained a dog to do something that takes memory?
They just memento every scene.
No, that's me. Just
that's true.
all the time. Yeah. But yes, and so
sorry, Grandpa Will.
Thank you.
Oh, Grandpa Will.
I'm so old. I was born in the far off year of 1982. We had wondrous technology back then. Cassette players.
Did you ever play the E.T. game, Grandpa?
No, they all ended up in a landfill. We also had these amazing technology called the laser discs. Let me tell you about those. No, but in the scene, Scott learning about the memories is kind of a trigger because he's having these memories about a potential attack from the night before.
So after this,
he goes to talk to Derek, right?
No. Well, yes. First, we have a cop that goes to the Hale house. And Derek has to give some special blue eyes to the canine unit there to make it shut up.
Oh, that poor dog.
Hey, don't narc that I'm in the house.
So Scott does go to see his mom to try and get the keys for his date, but of course she's not having it. And then right before Scott leaves, he catches a scent and he goes into one of the recovery rooms at the hospital where he finds the bus driver recovering from his awful attack that must have been Scott's, right? And then while Scott's in there kind of just looking at the guy in shock that this is what he did, the guy comes to and sees him and starts to lose his mind, which clearly means
it's the tagline for season 3.
Oh yeah. It is. That's right. Lose your mind.
Lose your mind.
No. Okay. Love, be afraid. Trust the instinct. This might hurt. Lose your mind. Can't go back. Watch your pack. To hell and back. And then just the final season.
Wait, what was right before watch your pack?
Can't go back.
Can't go back. Watch your pack. To hell and back.
Yes.
That's funny. That's
went through a rhyming phase.
That's like Seussical.
Yeah. It is. It is. It's great.
This might hurt is how I felt about everything regarding Teen Wolf.
Ouch.
No, this might hurt was like my emotions. They hurt my emotions because I cared
okay.
about the characters, and they're like
Suffering.
Suffering.
It's
so
okay, Calissa. We're only 2-3 episodes in. Nothing bad will ever happen to any of these characters, except for Scott, who thinks everything bad that's happened to him is Derek's fault.
He always sort of approaches things in a very confrontational manner. He comes in assuming that he knows that Derek did something. Like, there's never a scene where Scott is like, Derek, did you do this? And Derek is like, yes, or I'm not telling you, or, whatever. He just always comes in yelling, and I feel like Derek immediately gets defensive.
I can see that.
And it might have played differently if Scott ever showed up and was like, so this shitty thing happened. Was it you? And if Derek was like, no, that conversation would be very different, I feel like. Like, Derek doesn't lie to Scott. Scott lies to Derek.
Scott does everything with Derek pretty accusatorily, but at least in the scene, Derek gives him some good advice, which is, hey, you can't remember what happened, then go back to the crime scene and let your heightened werewolf senses do the remembering for you. Smell a crime scene and touch things, and those memories should be pulled from your subconscious. And sounds like pretty good advice. So Scott and Stiles take it and they go back to the bus, the crime scene at the school, which, come on, I feel like that should be like at an impound lot somewhere.
It should definitely be handled better.
That guy was on vacation.
But Scott goes to the bus and he gets on it and he starts, letting his werewolf senses do the remembering for him. And he remembers being there, and he remembers the bus driver being there, and the bus driver was being attacked by Derek, he believes. So unfortunately, Scott and Stiles get run off. So Scott can't really remember anymore. They get run off by a security guard, but Scott.
But to describe the scene of what he sees a werewolf that's not himself, Scott,
right,
with glowing red eyes attacking him. He then concludes that this must be Derek. So Scott sees a different werewolf that's not himself and thinks there are probably only 2 werewolves in the world, therefore that is Derek, despite Derek saying the thing about the kind that have been hunting us for centuries. And unless he's 300 years old, that means that there are other werewolves in the world.
That's very true.
Also, I'm not sure why he would give Scott this really helpful advice on how to remember if his whole plan is just for Scott to remember that it was him.
Yeah.
If that was his plan, he could have just said, it was me.
That's true. But Stiles does have a theory about this, that maybe Derek wanted him being Scott, to kill the bus driver. They wanted them to do it together as some kind of ritual. But Stiles says, well, why would he make you remember him trying to kill this guy? And maybe he wanted it to be like a shared kill between these 2 werewolves.
Yeah, I didn't understand that theory, though, because what does that have to do with why? Because if his whole point is to get that to happen, why wouldn't he, when Scott came to him, have been like, yeah, it was me, I bit you, I want us to kill it together, let's do it.
I feel like this is in service of the writers know that there's a reveal coming, and not letting, so it's like they're building to a reveal, but that means characters can't ask normal questions, or information has to be withheld in order to get a reveal later on. Granted, it is an amazing reveal, but so it means these characters have to not actually act like human beings in a couple of scenes just so that we can get that reveal. But in defense of the writing, I would say that Scott latches on to really anything that will allow him to go on a date with Allison. So even though it doesn't really make sense that Derek would want him to go remember Derek attacking someone, when he could have just said, I totally attacked that dude, I wanted us to kill him together so we could be werewolf bloody bros or something like that. But, Scott jumps at that because it's a theory that means he's not the person who did the attacking, which means he's not dangerous, which means he's not dangerous to Allison. So therefore they can go on their date.
Mm-hmm.
So
would that not be the same if it was a different wolf that's not Derek?
Yes, but I guess since I'm guessing just because Derek is the only other wolf that Scott knows, that in this whole thing, because
it lets him close the book on it.
It lets him close the book on it. So, because as far as he knows and believes, Derek is the one who bit him. So why would there be another wolf in this situation? Because again, we're not going to get that reveal until the very end, which is still a great, awesome reveal. But Scott is super happy and he's totally going to go on that date with Allison and unfortunately Lydia and Jackson. But, Allison will be there. So it's going to be great. And
that reminds me, do these teenagers not know about the term double date? Because they spend the whole episode talking about group dates. Y'all, it's not a group date. It's a double date. We have a term for this.
yes.
I'm so confused that these children have never heard this expression.
But at least the scene makes bowling look kind of fun. Scott and Allison, Lydia and Jackson, they're mostly having a good time, although Scott is very concerned about his bowling prowess after having made a very mighty statement at lunch that he's a great bowler, even though he hasn't been bowling since he was 8. So, yeah, he's not really looking forward to this. And we can all see why, because Allison's a great bowler. Lydia turns out to be a great bowler, and Jackson's a great bowler. Scott, on the other hand, not so much any of those words. And so he's not having a really great time at the start of things. Yes.
Because every time he throws a gutter ball, Jackson, who is, and this is true, a dick, just is immediately like, oh, you suck, McCall, and really just generally makes it difficult to bowl for love of the game.
Yes, no, absolutely. But a little bit later, Allison gives him some interesting advice. So it's not really so much love of the game driving him so much as
picturing her naked.
Boobs.
Love of the boobs.
Love of boobs. And then all of a sudden he becomes a fantastic bowler. So
okay, but in his defense, boobs are dope.
Boobs are pretty great. So
yeah,
that is a scientific fact.
I have to say about that, I am really impressed with Allison's game. That was a bold move.
Oh yeah, I would never have had that kind of confidence as a teenager.
Yeah,
I was just bold. Like, okay, Allison, yes. She just gets in there like, yeah, picture me naked. And this is their what?
First date.
First, not official, immediately aborted date.
Exactly. So yeah.
I was impressed. That's what I'm saying.
They've only known each other for 3 days. So yeah.
She's got game.
Great. She does have game. She does have game. And good for her. She's got the confidence,
Yeah.
But I feel like anyone born into the Argent family is just going to have confidence because Dad's got a lot of confidence. We've met Mom briefly. She seems like she has a lot of confidence. Mm-hmm. So why not? Allison knows what she wants. And it's fantastic. So, while the double date's happening, Derek's at the gas station gassing up his awesome looking black Camaro when he's approached by Argent and a couple of hunters. And Argent, much like Jackson, is a real dick in this scene.
Yeah,
just the real dick in this scene. And it's upsetting because he seems like a genuinely nice guy when he's not shooting people. Yeah, he's totally talking about how he's going to protect his family at all costs. And that's kind of what drives him. But unfortunately, Derek doesn't really know what that's about anymore because all of his family's dead. And it's just Chris.
It is horrible.
You could have just been like, hey, don't f around in Beacon Hills, please. That would have been it. We already know that in werewolf culture, please goes a long way.
It does go a long way.
He could have just been polite about it, but he's kind of a dick.
The whole time he's talking about, you clearly care about this car. You want to take care of the things you care about. All this euphemistic speak. I'm like, man, you basically just rolled up and said, you know what I like? Family. You know what you don't have? Family, because they're dead.
Yeah.
Good times. Honestly, if you're going to roll up and be that cruel, just dispense with the euphemisms. Just be open about just what an awful thing you're going to say to someone.
But then we would get the most intimidating windshield wiping ever seen on television.
That is true. And what a loss that would have been.
Yeah.
Everything Argent does is very intimidating and deliberate. He doesn't do anything without putting a lot of thought into it.
And hot.
Very hot. He's a very handsome gentleman. But, Argent's being a total dick. And then when he's leaving, of course, Derek has to just kind of get it in there a little bit too. And he turns into a dick and he tells Argent that he forgot to change the oil on his car, which was a good line and not too shabby at all.
It's pretty good.
Was it check the oil or change the oil?
It was change the oil. Yes.
It was check.
It was check the oil. Still a good line. Still good.
It was
just
good.
Throwing it back in Argent's face. He's like, oh, is this the game we're playing? And Argent's like, no, this is the game we're playing. And then his punk little hunter friend breaks his car window.
His henchman.
His henchman.
Henchman number one.
Henchman number one just breaks that window like a total tool. And that totally sucks. But I do honestly wish we could have just had a scene where we saw Derek angrily vacuuming glass out of his car. It would have been really fun. I mean, it would have been sad, but it still would have been just angrily vacuuming his car. I'm making vacuuming motions. Y'all can't see what I'm doing here. But
that would have been great. That would have been great.
Just doing that, and I feel like that probably happens to him a lot. So he like pops his trunk and there's like a whole new window that he just puts in. He just got like a whole pile of them because he's like, this is not the first time it's happened. So yeah, that would have been funny. It would. I think that would have been funny. Sad, but
it also it would have been funny, and it definitely plays into my love of or my desire to see the scenes between the scenes, like the boring things between the big marquee fights and stuff. Like, I kind of want to see Derek vacuum broken glass out of his beautiful Camaro. Yep. Also, I want to see one of them brushing their fangs. Oh, I just. You know what I mean? I want to see one of them brushing their fangs.
Kind of like, just getting in there. Yeah, that would be fun. That would be really fun. Speaking of fun, back at the bowling alley, everyone seems to be having a great time except for Jackson because he is no longer the best bowler out of the four on this double date. And Allison and Scott win the game. And it totally pisses Jackson off. But before that, there's actually a moment where Lydia asks Scott if he'll give her some pointers on how to throw the ball right, and he's like, "No, you're totally awesome on your own," because it's very awkward. He doesn't want to be part of this awkwardness. So Lydia, throws the ball on her own and does fantastically. And Allison kind of pulls her aside and was like, "Hey, you don't have to pretend to suck."
And Lydia says, "I do plenty of sucking just for his benefit." And I am just amazed that they got that line past the MTV censors.
That is
what?
I cannot believe. Honestly, that line and the coin slot line, which we have yet to mention from this episode, were shocking to me on rewatch. I cannot remember what my original thoughts were on it back in 2011 because I'm very old and my memory's fading. But on rewatch, I was like, Jesus Christ.
Well, I think MTV was pushing the US remake of Skins around the same time, like Teen Wolf was on air, and everyone was just so upset about Skins. No one was paying any attention to what was happening on Teen Wolf.
It kind of went under the radar because they were so busy being like, oh, Skins has so much sex and stuff.
And they're teenagers.
And
what?
They probably were just like, well, that one's about werewolves, so we shouldn't worry about that one.
Who cares?
And as a result, they were able to get this like fantastic, like barely veiled sexual commentary here.
Yeah. Scott's feeling pretty fantastic. So he approaches Jackson and tries to bury the hatchet with him. He tells him, look, man, we don't gotta be enemies. And
Jackson said he'd bury that hatchet right in Scott's back.
Absolutely. And Scott, Jackson says something. I don't remember exactly what he says. What does he say? It's something like, it's not that I don't like you, it's that you're cheating. Isn't it something like that? Because I remember he says something along the lines of, it's not that I don't like you. You're cheating. You are cheating at this thing that I work hard at. And you're cheating. And I'm going to find out your secret. And I bet you don't want Allison to know that secret. And that's a fantastic scene. Just, Jackson playing the pinball, and he looks back and there's Allison with Lydia. And he's like, and I bet you don't want her to know either. And it's just like, oh shit. He is
just playing pinball with Scott's balls.
Oh boy, he is. And I feel like that's a great declaration moment, where you have in a story where you just kind of get a piece of information or something where it's kind of like the gauntlet is laid down and it's like, this thing cannot happen, but you're like, well, it's a story, so it's probably going to happen, right? Because that's where all the best drama is going to come from. And so for me, I remember the first time watching this distinctly, and I mentioned it to Jeff. Oh God, when was it? I think it was right when I became the writer assistant. We were talking about something, but I referenced this moment where I was like, that's a countdown. Like we are counting down the minute until she finds out that Scott's a werewolf. So it's just great. Werewolf drama. Of course, while all this is happening, Derek has craftily snuck, broken and entered into. So while all this is happening, Derek has gone to the hospital and he's in the room of the bus driver who was attacked. And with his animal magnetism, tells him to wake up from unconsciousness.
I buy that.
He is just like, wake up. And the guy like is unconscious and wakes up. And I'm just like, damn, Derek, that is so awesome, you know? And he tries to question the guy, which is very interesting because he's questioning the person he supposedly attacked on the bus. So I'm feeling like maybe we don't have all the information here that Scott believes he has, but he tries to talk to the bus driver, and the bus driver says he's sorry. And he mentions the Hale family name. And of course, Derek's like, how do you know me? How do you know that name? And the bus driver,
the eyebrows, man.
yes. And the bus driver just keeps saying, I'm sorry. And he dies of guilt. He just like his heart gives out from guilt, but guilt over what? You know, so like, what's happening here? And what does it have to do with the Hale family? But of course he dies. So we don't get any more information. So I guess we're just gonna have to bide our time on learning more there. But the one thing, I mean, and the scene was totally cute. And then Argent seeing their kiss was totally creepy and kind of mysterious. But the one takeaway I took from it was that Allison earlier in the episode snuck out of the house.
Like parkouring.
Yeah.
Like parkouring. Like she flips in one of the first of many unnecessary flips on this show. So many unnecessary flips, guys. I feel like that should be a drinking game, that anytime there are unnecessary flips, you just take a drink.
And that's how someone dies from this.
Yeah, someone will die really fast. But she snuck out of her room and then just waltzed right in the front door. And I was like, girl, have you never snuck out of your house before? I mean, we have established in previous episodes that she's a very good daughter and she and her family get along very well and she's never been grounded and stuff like this. And it's just like, you clearly don't know what you're doing here.
Yeah. She forgot. Like by the end of the date, she'd already forgotten that
forgotten what she had done. It was just such
a great date.
It was a fantastic date. I just feel like she went in the door and her mom is just standing there and she was like, oh, that's right.
Yeah, right. and it's Edie Mays, who is very intimidating.
Very intimidating.
So I would be like,
she's a sweetheart in person.
Total sweetheart.
Right.
But on the show,
the character though
intense. Yes.
is like, if she gave me that death glare, I would absolutely be cowed. Like,
yes, they would
so effective.
On the police report, it would say cause of death, Victoria Argent stare. I'd be like, oh God, we got it. Oh, that's awful.
We understand.
We get it. That's really rough. Yeah. I think we mentioned this before that like she and Argent are like this power couple that are just like super intense people who had like a super intense child, sort of, who's going to be learning all that intensity. All right. Well, we are heading right into the end, guys. So after his date, Scott goes home where Stiles has nearly been brained by Mama McCall with a baseball bat because he just keeps climbing through open windows instead of going through the front door.
Can I say how much I love that the baseball bat travels between characters? In the pilot, it's Scott using it whenever he hears a noise at night. This one, it's Mama McCall. And later on in the show, we get to see Stiles brandishing that baseball bat. It's just fun.
It is great. It does kind of change hands throughout the course of the series. And it's fantastic.
They're the sisterhood of the traveling baseball bat.
So Scott gets home after his date and he's super happy, but then he gets super bummed because Stiles tells him that the bus driver succumbed to his wounds, and succumb means dies, folks, because Scott didn't really pick up on that. But
it's an SAT word. He'll
get there. Yeah. No, he'll get there. So Scott believes that Derek killed the bus driver, and he tears off into the night and storms the Hale house to confront Derek. And he tells Derek that he believes he killed the bus driver and that he killed his sister. But then Derek jumps out and throws Scott down a giant set of stairs. And then in a really cool move, jumps down into like a superhero pose. It's fantastic. And he says he didn't kill them. But of course, Scott's not having it. So he throws Derek through a wall in the house. And that takes us into our very first Teen Wolf werewolf fight on the show. And it's just spectacular to watch. One of the things, dear listeners, that you're going to learn watching this show is that we have a lot of werewolf fights on this show, and they're all awesome. They're all shot beautifully. Our stunt teams were always amazing. And some of the stunts in this episode, and you'll see in later episodes, look like they really, really hurt. Just people getting thrown around like rag dolls. And oh my God, it just looks so tough. But we also get in this scene Derek Hale's first transformation. Kate, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, okay, well, first of all, Scott throws him into a wall. Somehow he's not even mad that Scott has just destroyed what has to be the Hale house's last load-bearing wall.
Yes.
But he gets up and says, "That was cute."
Yep.
And then he shrugs off the jacket.
Oh, it's so cool.
It's very cool. It's super effective. And then he walks behind this sort of blurred glass window while he's transforming. It looks beautiful. It looks so artful. And it's really practical because, we've talked a little bit before about the budget of Teen Wolf. MTV was not used to doing scripted TV. It was used to doing reality TV, which is a lot cheaper. So Teen Wolf never had much money to work with. And I feel like that shot is such a great example of the directors and the DPs, directors of photography of Teen Wolf, coming up with these really elegant solutions for making something look gorgeous without spending money. So instead of having like a CGI transformation where it goes from, Derek Hale's regular human face to his shifted werewolf face, you really are only seeing like the broad strokes of the transformation through this window. It's almost like expressionist looking, and it looks gorgeous.
It does.
And then they fight.
And it's pretty awesome to watch. And again, this is the first of many fights on Teen Wolf. And it's so great because like when I was watching it, I was like, oh, this fight is fantastic. But also another part of me was like, oh, it's so quaint. This little fight between these characters. Because listeners, we go to some crazy places with fights later on in the show. This isn't a spoiler, but it's just the fights just get bigger and better with every single season. And they become a lot more dramatic and more emotional. And it's just so interesting to see that in season 1, episode 3 was when we get our first fight. And it's just great. I can't wait for all of you to see what comes next because they just get better and better with each passing episode and each passing season. It's just fantastic.
This fight pretty much only takes place because Derek woke up on the douche side of the bed that morning. Like
you would too if you woke up in your burnt down house that your family died in. Kate.
Well, the douche side of the bed is the only one that survived the fire. So I mean, that's the side.
Yeah.
So,
no, yeah. I mean, this is all very true. But I just feel like Derek really only has this fight because he needs to blow off some steam.
Also,
yes.
Also, they only really have this fight because this is episode 3, and Derek at any time could have been like, "I didn't bite you, Scott."
Yeah,
that was not me.
Derek doesn't talk so good.
He does not talk so good at times. So
he gives like very like short one-word answers a lot. He's like that person who like only will text you back the one word, and you're like, "Oh my God, are they mad at me?"
All of his responses are the text equivalent of K.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, but
put a period on it just to really emphasize.
But I will say, as I said before, if Scott had come in and said, "Did you bite me?" he would have said no. Because that's how the conversation on the porch goes, right?
That's
he
very
just
true.
Asks him a question. Derek gives a clear, concise answer, a clear, concise, and honest answer.
Yeah.
But Scott doesn't communicate that way with Derek, and Derek doesn't respond well to the way that he communicates, to the way that Scott communicates with him. Derek is like, just ask me a question.
Yeah.
Like, quit coming in here just like throwing accusations around based on nothing other than that, like, I swooped in and saved you from some hunters and like stopped you from, clawing up your girlfriend. And suddenly everything that goes wrong in Beacon Hills is my fault. You're being a little werewolf dick, Scott. Have you tried saying please? It's very meaningful to my people.
Yes, it is. So this is quite the revelation for Scott and the audience. I mean, for 3 episodes, we've been acting under, we've been believing that it was Derek who bit Scott. But what we learn here at the end of episode 1 of 3 is that Derek, in fact, did not bite Scott. Calissa, who bit Scott?
Ooh, you'll have to stay tuned and find out who the alpha is, because this is where Derek reveals that only an alpha can bite someone and turn them into a werewolf. And as we pull back from the Hale house, we see glowing red eyes watching from the dark woods, and this has to be the alpha.
Has to be. This is one of my absolute favorite shots from the entire series, because I clearly remember watching this the first time around back in 2011. It being revealed that Derek didn't bite Scott wasn't a super big revelation to me, because I kind of felt like that's probably what it was going to be, because Derek hasn't been acting villainous. He's just been acting douchey, again, because the douche side of the bed was the only part that survived the fire. But so that wasn't a big revelation to me. But what was the revelation was this dramatic pullback out of the house to reveal glowing red eyes in the woods. I did not expect that to happen. And I remember just on my couch, just leaning forward, being like, what? Oh my God, there it is, and it's fantastic. And you just see these great glowing eyes and you hear a growl, and then it just cuts to black. And that's the end of it. And it's just
that's how we find out that werewolves are color-coded.
That's right. Yes. Well, no. Not really, because we've seen Derek's blue eyes before, and we've seen Scott's yellow eyes. We see Derek's blue eyes in this episode.
That's right. That's true. But we didn't know that there are... We don't know until this conversation that there are different types of werewolves.
That's right.
So, there could have been various explanations for why one has blue and one has yellow, but when we see the red eyes, I feel like that's the clearest sign that, the red eyes are the alpha, therefore the eye colors do have a meaning. It's not just genetically I have blue human eyes and yellow werewolf eyes.
Yeah.
There's a significance to it.
Right. Yeah. There's some kind of strata. Hierarchy to werewolves.
I think we skipped over. Derek explained in this episode that Derek and Scott are betas. So
even though...
Okay, really they're omegas, but omegas are not discussed yet. So.
Right.
We have to wait another season for that.
Derek is an omega. Technically speaking, Scott at this point is a beta because he hasn't fully rejected the pack bond because he doesn't know how to. Yeah. He clearly wants to, but he doesn't know how to break this connection. So
there's not a button there to just click no to the invite.
Right. He can't just swipe like no thanks, Alpha. I'm not feeling
Can I swipe left on this Alpha?
Yeah.
Is that what I can do here?
That's this Alpha is not for me. He seems to be into clawing throats and stuff. But yeah, technically that was when I rewatched it. I was like, well, technically, baby girl, you're an omega, but you're right about Scott.
That's right. No, it's very interesting because what we get in this episode, we get two great pieces of information. The first great piece of information is that Derek didn't bite Scott, that there's another wolf in this story called an alpha, and that alphas can turn people with bite. So that's cool. Also, I want to say we don't learn it in this episode, but I think it's the first instance of it where an alpha's howl can cause the shift. Because when it shows Scott asleep and he's having a restless sleep, and then we hear the howl and he wakes up shifted. Mm-hmm. And so the alpha can cause the shift. So that's implied in this episode, but we don't actually get that information, I think, until 2 episodes from now.
That's a good point.
I think. But it is interesting that was seeded in earlier in the season, that there's this power that an alpha has that it can bring on the shift. But the second piece of information we get is that there's a hierarchy among wolves, that it's not just just werewolves freewheeling about, just being werewolves and all this type of stuff. It's no, there's a hierarchy, and that there are, I guess, leaders, maybe that's the right word, I'm not sure, but there's an alpha. So that person is definitely top of the pyramid. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in the next episodes now that we have a third wolf in the mix. Up until this point, we had 2.5. And
that's
my God.
Well, you should feel bad about that joke.
That's dark.
I thought it was funny, but up until this point, we've had 2 wolves, Scott and Derek, and now we have a new player in this game, and clearly this is going to be a much more powerful wolf than we've seen before.
The alpha.
Yes. And that's what it's going to be. I think moving forward is now who is the alpha. Yeah. So no, I'm very excited to see what happens moving forward now that we have an alpha in the mix, and I'm guessing we're going to have to figure out who the alpha is. So what do y'all think?
About who the alpha is? Or our story?
Just move the story moving forward now that we have this new piece of information.
I was like, yeah, duh.
Excellent.
Because I just felt like, okay, Scott's a teenager, and I remember enough about being a teenager to be really happy that no one was filming me and the decisions I made. But I felt like it was none of Derek's actions would have made any sense if he had been a mustache twirling Alpha going around biting people
Very true.
without their consent. Because, okay, so he like drove Allison home, but like actually drove her home safely from a party. And like, it's not even like he stole her jacket, because it's not like she's like, yeah, some weirdo drove me home and took my jacket. Like, I feel like the most logical explanation for that sequence of events is he gave her a ride home safely. She left her jacket in his car. And then he was like, I know, I'll use this to get Scott to come have this conversation with me. And I can give him kind of the werewolf 101 and be like, you're going to pop a lot of awkward werewolf boners. You got to be careful that you don't go around just like murdering people, including your girlfriend.
I think Derek tried to arrange it. He like threw it in the back, so she just like forget about it.
I think it was totally planned.
Something like that.
I think the moment he saw Scott run off, he was like, jackpot.
But my point is though that he
didn't just run up and steal it.
Right. He didn't. He wasn't just like, I need your jacket. You know, like. So
oh my God, where'd you get that jacket? I need it.
I love it. But then Scott shows up. The conversation does not go as planned. He helps, save Scott from the hunters. He's kind of watching from the sidelines. He's watching as Scott basically broadcasts to the whole town that he's a werewolf. Like, he's making it just as easy as possible for anyone. And so he tries various ways. There's the bite is a gift. We're brothers. That didn't work. There's final kill you if you don't stop doing this stuff. That somehow doesn't work either. And then finally, Scott comes to him for help and is like, how do I retrieve these memories? He provides Scott with succinct but actually very helpful advice. And then Scott concludes like that Derek must have been the one to bite him and the one who killed the bus driver. And he told Scott how to figure that out because ? I feel like when I got that information, not the alpha part, because that's more the mythology.
Yeah.
But just the fact that it was not him, I was like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because if it had been, there would have been a pretty labyrinthine explanation for how Derek's actions supported that sequence of events.
Yeah.
He's as bad at planning villainous acts as he is at communicating. So.
Well, that actually would have been a fairly decent explanation, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, so I wasn't surprised by that, but I was really interested in this idea of like different types of werewolves and pack structure. And then I wanted some of that cutting room floor stuff about like, could both of your parents be alphas or could there only be one? And if so, what is the dating process like for werewolves? Like, would you have to would there be like a werewolf dating app where you have to put your status
alpha
there?
Or beta
like,
and stuff,
put like alpha, beta, omega, and then whether you're bitten or born, because some people might have preferences or there might be cultural differences based on whether you were raised by humans or raised by other wolves. All that boring stuff that no one wants to hear about. That's absolutely what I want, is what I'm saying.
Alpha seeking, beta, no biteys, only borns.
Yeah.
Because there's were prejudice.
Yeah. But also, there probably is some cultural stuff. Like Derek would probably have a really hard time. Well, no, Derek definitely has a really hard time talking to humans and or bitten wolves, because clearly his style of communication is more in line with like Malia's, which is ask me a question, I'll answer it honestly.
Yeah.
Don't ask me a question and I'll just say whatever I'm thinking without sugarcoating it whatsoever. Yeah. That's their style of communication. Periodic eye rolls are another important element. So yeah, I wasn't surprised, but I was really interested in this idea of like pack dynamics and how werewolves can differ from one another.
Right.
And just, excited to find out who the alpha is.
It's going to be fun. I'm guessing maybe it's a character we already know. I mean, we've already introduced a lot of characters on the show so far. So I guess we're just going to have to see what happens.
Wait and see.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Who is the alpha? Only time will tell. So this is a good episode. I feel like we've left Act 1 of the story and we're moving into Act 2. And that's a lot of fun. So I'm very excited to see what's coming next for Scott and everyone else in Beacon Hills.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to continue this journey with y'all, but right now we are going to jump over to our talk with Dino Meneghin, the composer of Teen Wolf. Let's have a listen. Hey Dino.
Hey,
can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How are you? Hey.
Excellent. And you? Oh man, your studio looks so amazing. I just have some trash on the thing right there. I wish I had taken down now.
Hi, Kate. Hi, Calissa.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Well, Dino's our incredible composer who just brought so much more vibrancy and life to the show with the fantastic score that I got right when I left. I asked Post, I was like, can I have the score? And they were like, you mean for this season? I was like all of it.
For the whole show?
The entire show.
Would be great.
And I was like, they're like, yeah, I was like, I've got a hard drive right here. And so, yeah, no, it's part of my...
What's this in my pocket? It's a hard drive.
Like,
Put
I've already got this hard drive
it.
with my name on it. Oh, how did that get there? But
I remember you told me that at the time.
Yeah, and I listen to it all the time when I'm writing. It's so much fun and so good. And it really adds just another layer of awesome to all of the awesome that comes with Teen Wolf already. And that's totally on you. So there we go.
Thanks, man. That's always to me high praise when somebody listens to my music when they're writing. That's always my.
Well, it's great because I mean, much like the show. I mean, obviously much like the show because the music is from the show. But it's just it has great action, has great intensity. So it's like, oh, okay, there's some stuff from season 3 that I love the most when I'm writing something that's kind of fast paced or something like that. Mm-hmm. But then it's like I love I love the slower tracks as well. You know, because Teen Wolf has great quiet moments as well. Like we were just talking with Russell Mulcahy yesterday, and we were talking about like how the show can get very bombastic, but it can also be quiet. Like it knows when to pull back and all that, which is great. And it knows when to just have quiet music. I'm using awful, I think, terminology here. It's
intimate.
It's intimate.
You know, it
yes.
feels. Yeah.
Yes. The show, I feel like is, you know, kind of like our bread and butter was the big scope and all that. But then we can really hit you with the intimacy too, you know, and it comes out of nowhere sometimes. And it's fantastic because you've had these amazing knockout scenes with great action and acting and all that, but then it's like we really just kind of bring it in and get real quiet with just 2 actors, and it's fantastic. And then there's always the score in the background just giving us that little extra something, you know, that's just bringing something to the scene. And it's fantastic. It's just fantastic. This is definitely one of my favorite scores. It's one of my favorite scores.
Thanks.
Like I said, I listen to it all the time when I'm writing because it's just so good, and there's so much of it that it's like, because normally I have to make a giant playlist of stuff that's like, I need like 5 hours of music. And it's like, no, I've got so many gigabytes of Teen Wolf footage, of Teen Wolf music here. And I just turned it on. It's like, just pick a season, let it go. And it's just.
It's like the life cycle of creativity, right? So the show is written and then it's scored. So the music complements the writing and then it comes back and inspires more writing.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think so.
Actually.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's dive in here. Dino, how did you get into composing? Was this always a dream, or had you been a musician and discovered composing?
I actually very specifically for a long time didn't want to be a composer because I knew a few people who did it, and it seemed like a really tedious and nerve-wracking job. And I was right. It can be a tedious and nerve-wracking job. But I had been, at the time that I started working on Teen Wolf, I had been writing music for advertisements. And at the time, that was what I wanted to do because the jobs were short and it seemed like a less stressful environment. And I knew some friends who were doing well financially doing it. So it seemed like a good thing to sort of put my time into. And when the Teen Wolf thing came up, I hadn't really considered actually, writing for scripted television or film, but when the opportunity made itself available, I tried for the job and I ended up getting the job. And it was just kind of one of those weird things in life where sort of when you say yes to everything, eventually you sort of sometimes you end up in situations that you just wouldn't have predicted. And it just ended up that I really enjoyed it. And the more I did it, the more I actually enjoyed this kind of work.
You said the opportunity presented itself. How how do you go out for a job like that? Do you record like a sample for an episode?
Well, the way it happened actually was that this is sort of one of those, this is kind of a great example of one of those things where they always tell you to sort of, be open to a lot of different kinds of jobs because you don't know how things will lead to each other. I had been doing music for MTV. I'd been doing a lot of what are called song replacements, where somebody says, like, hey, we want it to sound like, Sia, but, don't get us sued, that kind of thing, and like, and I've been doing a lot of that at the time. And I had been through doing that, I ended up working on a show called Taking the Stage, which was an MTV show that was it was a reality show, and they followed these kids at an arts high school in Cincinnati, Ohio. And the music supervisor on that show and I got to be good friends. And when she was approached about doing Teen Wolf, she called me and said, hey, there's this thing, do you want to do this? And do you want to put out a reel for this? So that was how I got the opportunity. Now, what I ended up giving them was actually one of the things that I gave them was a reel of, it was a demo for, it was a Samsung commercial, and it was like a minute and a half long. It was like this big cinematic action sequence. And it just so happened that I had this sort of some very, some sort of action-y sort of cinematic stuff available at the time. Now, I mean, if I'm being 100% honest, I have a feeling that probably, MTV at the time was, they hadn't done any scripted stuff. And this was their first scripted show. And I'm sure that had they had a proper budget, they probably would not have called me. They probably would have called somebody with a lot more experience. But I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And that ended up just sort of starting my career as a composer. So at the time when I actually ended up getting the job, I was on tour with Michael Bublé. I was a guitar player.
Wow.
So I was actually, I forgot where we were exactly, but I remember talking to Jeff Davis in the parking lot of some stadium somewhere. And I ended my tenure with Michael in December of 2010. And then I started in January of 2011 on Teen Wolf. So just like the timing ended up being really perfect for me. And I'd been trying for about, 5 or 6 years to find a way to get off the road and do something else. And that sort of just, that was not what I imagined I was going to be doing, but that was how anyway, that's a very long-winded way to answer that question. So I apologize.
No, it's great. It's really interesting.
We have a newborn right now, so I don't really sleep. So I really apologize for if it sounds like I'm answering, if the person answering sounds like they basically are existing on, caffeine, 2 hours of sleep, and a little bit of hope. That's because that's what's happening. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
Newborn. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
The music supervisor you mentioned, was that Laura Webb?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's great. And we met on that show, Taking the Stage. She came on for the second season of that show. And we've done a bunch of stuff together since then. She's been a great colleague and just a really good friend too. So
what kind of influences did you have when finding the sound of Teen Wolf?
A lot of it was talking with Jeff Davis, because Jeff is somebody who has a very clear idea of what he wants musically. Jeff has a very strong idea of, he's a big fan of music and films from like the late 80s, early 90s. A lot of like James Horner and John Williams and some of the other ones that there was a lot of those was like, he loves it. Close Encounters was a big reference a lot. Superman 2, I remember, was one of those films that like he loved and he referenced a lot. Not always stylistically specifically, but a lot of the way that the music functioned in the in the show. So, but yeah, so a lot of that was working with Jeff and trying out different things. When we started the show, I think by the time, we ended the show kind of had its own identity a little more. I think in the first season, obviously we were still, kind of trying to find that. And so you can kind of hear in the first season, maybe it kind of varies a little more, stylistically, things that we were kind of, trying out while we were sort of trying to find the music varies about as much as Scott's hairpiece makeup. Like you can see like in the different seasons how, the first season, like it came to about here, and then the second season they backed it up, and like it took them about to the fourth season to really nail it. And yeah.
Well, that's interesting because as a story progresses and as a show progresses, you're really you're just kind of honing in on what the story needs to be, what it wants to be, and like all the elements that need to go into it. And, and obviously the score is going to be that way too, where, when you're a fresh show and you're the pilot and you've got your first season where you're just trying to maybe experiment a little bit more and just kind of really hone in on like the themes or the ideas that you want the score to get across. And then of course, by the end, it's like you know exactly who you are, and it's wonderful. And I'm glad you mentioned James Horner, just because I one of the questions, it wasn't even a question that I wrote, I just wanted to comment that the bit where Scott falls down the hill and gets attacked by the werewolf, it sounds like James Horner's Alien score, and in the best possible way. Like it just has that wonderful energy that he brought to that score, and then just feeling it in this scene, and it's just wonderful. Like it sounds so good. And all of the score sounds good. It's just that scene just really kind of caught me when I was like, oh, this feels like, like this was influenced by other people. And then saying, because I know, having worked with Jeff and being in the writer's room, we were always talking about other movies and stories, the stuff that we just loved and really gravitated to. And it's how can we bring the emotions we get from those stories and bring that to Teen Wolf? How can we get our audience to feel what we feel when we watch Aliens or Superman 2 or Close Encounters? Like how do we bring that to the story? So it's great you mentioned that, just because I love that scene. It's a fantastic scene to begin with, but the score really just elevates it and makes it.
He had that written in his notes for this call. That's why when you said James Horner, I made that face, because I was like, Will, spot on.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
No, the thing you have to remember when you listen to the score, especially in the first season, is I had no idea what the I was doing. You're really like listening to somebody like figuring out sort of the language of film music sort of in real time. As it was very much like it was kind of funny because it was very much like one of those, it's like those those old Hollywood stories that you would hear that like never happen anymore. Be like, and I was walking by the Warner lot, and they pulled me in and said, can you operate a crane? You know what I mean? And like that kind of stuff. And it's like, and it was literally, it was sort of like, they were like, do you know how to be a composer? And I was like, yeah. And I think to a certain extent, it was, I knew the fundamentals of it, but I had I was really trying to figure this out, as I was doing it. So I had come from a background of, the longest thing I had written was like, a minute long, piece of music for a commercial, so I didn't know how to write like a, 8-9 minute, action sequence. So a lot of it was just me, you're hearing somebody just sort of try to figure this stuff out. And I'm lucky that it ended up working out, because it sort of could have been a disaster. So,
I never would have thought that you didn't have a lot of experience beforehand. The sounds are just so incredible and cinematic that it just seems like you or someone who came from years of working on major TV shows, like HBO stuff and everything. It's just, it's really incredible, what you're able to do. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. What I think the biggest difference is that when you're, when you're kind of starting out with something like that, what ends up happening is you're sort of always sort of returning serve. You don't have quite enough command of all of the language and the technique to really sort of bring a lot to it. So it was really more like I was just trying not to screw up. And it took me until, I don't think you hear until like maybe the fourth season where I started to get a lot more confident and started to have ideas like, okay, well, what if we do it this way? Now, like the show that I'm working on now, we don't even use temp score and it's an animated show and we have longer turnaround time. So we're not turning out like an episode a week. So like it's completely based on, the score is completely based on conversations that I have with the showrunner. And so, but I couldn't have done that back then. It took, for me, like Teen Wolf was like going to film school. I think in a way I couldn't have done that with anybody else because Jeff knows exactly what he wants the music to do. And learning how to write in a way that made Jeff happy, what really just taught me a lot about, it was like finishing school. It really taught me how to write music in a way that like sometimes when I have other people on my team, I'll end up teaching them things that, that Jeff taught me, nice. Because he had a very specific way of really, tracking a scene and tracking dialogue with the music that not everybody does. So yeah, Jeff is very responsible for a lot of the way I write, to this day.
I feel the same way in many respects, where having been a writer for Jeff, that he knows exactly what he wants. He doesn't waffle. He doesn't, he's not like, well, let's try this. Let's see what's this. He's right. Like, I know exactly what I want. Here's how we're going to accomplish this, and like you said, like working on Teen Wolf for me as a writer, like I thought I was okay when I started on Teen Wolf. And then once I got into the writer's room and was working, I was like, I have so much to learn. I don't know anything like I thought I did, and I still break story the way we did it on Teen Wolf. Like I still, I use like the same questions and stuff like that we use to break every single episode. That's how I break all the stories that I work on, just because it was great. It was a great, like you said, it was like school. It was like going to school and learning everything that you thought you kind of knew already, but then kind of being like it's finishing school. And now it's like when you leave the project, you're like, now you can do this. You mentioned not using temp music. I know we did use temp music on Teen Wolf sometimes. Do you have a preference? Do you like seeing a scene with some music ideas in there, or do you like just seeing kind of an empty scene and just letting it all come to you that way?
I think most composers would prefer not to have temp music. I think, like the way that we're working on the show that I'm working on now is, basically we literally just watch a whole episode dry and we sort of spot it and just talk about a lot of the conversations that I have with the showrunner. In fact, all of them, they're almost never specifically about music. They're more about how he wants the music to function and sort of what character's point of view we're going to be in right here. And, character motivations and things. And, that for me is is really rewarding, because then, I can sit there and say, okay, what's the best way to accomplish this? Now, the thing is, this show is animated and we have much longer lead times than we do and it's online. Like Teen Wolf, we were doing, like an hour, a 42-minute show every, week and a half. And there's absolutely no way you could do that. You couldn't do this process there because when you're turning around something that fast in a week or less, you have to basically have an idea of there isn't a lot of time to go, you know what, that doesn't work. Let's try it a different way. You have to basically say, okay, this is what works. You do get rewrites and things, but it's like you basically have to have an idea of what works. It's not as much fun in a certain way, but it's like that's just the reality of when you have a schedule like that. You just can't, do it. So, in those situations where you have to have temp music, sort of the next best thing is if you can use music that you've already written from the show or from other projects. At least then you're not chasing somebody else's temp. I think everybody understands why it happens, but it is frustrating to have a temp that somebody has sort of fallen in love with, and then they end up wanting you to do to recreate what's on the temp track, and I think that it's frustrating because obviously you don't you're kind of like, well, if you want that composer, call that guy. I don't, you know what I mean? It's like and that's obviously, for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's budgetary, sometimes it's schedule wise, sometimes they can't call that person. But I mean, in those cases, I always kind of say, hey, you know what, let's, what if we try it like this and I try to kind of encourage people that like, look, like, this show or this film really needs to have its own identity musically. Like we don't, not just for me, but for the showrunner or the, director as well. Like you should be a part of this process as well. You should be, we should be creating this together. And, you don't necessarily, sort of like, don't sell it short and just try to chase whatever the last film you saw was, and that you liked. So, right. And, sometimes you win that conversation, sometimes you don't. I've been lucky that, the last couple of things I've gotten to do, I've gotten a lot of freedom to, not have to really deal with that too much. So
that's fantastic.
You mentioned that, that you would talk about sort of which character's perspective the audience is going to be experiencing the scene from. So did you sort of develop a different type of sound for different Teen Wolf characters?
Well, yes. I mean, we had a lot of different character themes. That when I was talking about those conversations about character point of view, I was referencing a show that I'm working on currently. The way that Jeff and I would talk about the show was similar, but in a little different way. We would talk very specifically about music. And also when you have a show, when you've been doing something for 3 or 4 seasons, a lot of times you end up referencing other things that you've done in the past. Yeah, we had a lot of character themes because we had a lot of characters. And we also had a thing where, because, the show had in a certain way, it was kind of like a monster of the week where every season, sort of monster of the season, where it's like every season we would be take mythology from like a different part of the world. I would always try to adapt the music we would always try to include some things. So like, I think it was in season 3 when we were in Mexico. I used, was it 4?
I think it's 4. Yeah.
It's all a blur of Red Bull and pretzels to me at this point. I remember like we used some folk songs, some Sanjuroko. I got into Sanjuroko music, which is a style that's actually pretty popular in LA, but that comes from Mexico. And, when we did all the Japanese stuff, we, brought in some Japanese themes. And, I tried to the best of my ability to do, and when we actually what was interesting is when we did all the stuff with the druid stuff, when we did like the chant and the whole, the choir of the undead that we had, when we had on the show, I was going into like musicology departments and stuff and, emailing people and being like, hey, was there druid music? And, they didn't write anything down. So, that was like one of those things where it's like, we found out there really wasn't like druid music. So druid music was kind of like whatever you guessed it was, so but anyway, we tried our best to incorporate, into the music, whatever part of the world we were referencing. And sorry, to get back to your question about character point of view, it wasn't as much we didn't talk about point of view as much as really sort of character themes and developing those character themes. And that was something that Jeff like really hammered home to the point where like that was probably one of the biggest influences Jeff had on me was just the idea to like really write memorable themes. And I'm not saying that I always write memorable themes, but I always try to. And so I tend to, I almost, I keep kind of lists when I'm writing of all the character themes I have and the ways that I write them and the way that I've gotten much more comfortable doing it. At that time, I was a lot less comfortable doing it, but that was kind of one of the things that Jeff really hammered home in me that now I just can't get away from.
So it's just so interesting, like how, like the process of finding like the sound, because you're, like every season we did have like a different mythology to pull from. It's like Jeff was always like, we need to find different places in the world where we can pull mythology from and not just do the same old thing over and over again. But then it's like every time you do that, it just opens a door to new sound, that you don't really think about maybe initially, but it's like, oh, hey, we're going to do, Japanese mythology. So it's like, well, let's bring that sound into the show. Let's not just keep doing the same thing. And I always liked how each season had like a new sound in a sense, whereas the same, it's, you're building off what came before, but it's like, I feel like you can almost just play tracks from a certain season and be like, oh, that's 5, or that's 4, or that's the original or the first season. And I think it's fantastic. It's just awesome. It's so cool. It's so cool.
So season 2 gets an opening title sequence, and the music is fantastic. I thought it was instantly iconic. Absolutely. How did you go about finding the main title theme for Teen Wolf?
So that was a process just like anything else. We did, I still have on a hard drive somewhere like all the rejected versions of the main title. And, I remember that would have been in like 2012 or 2013, I think. So like at that time, like dubstep was really hot, you know what I mean? So like, God, it feels like forever ago. So I remember like I did, I had some like very dubstep. It sounded like, Voltron dry humping a dumpster, and you can cut that out if you want.
No, that's
sorry.
No, we won't do that.
I mentioned I don't sleep a lot. So I'm going to be a great dad. So yeah, we had a lot of, rejected versions. And actually one of the things, and I still have it, one of the versions we actually did was I did a remix of Hungry Like the Wolf, the Duran Duran. And there was some issue with the rights or whatever, but I have it. It wasn't bad, actually.
That was for season.
I would love to hear that. That's amazing.
Right? I was actually just trying to figure out if it would be polite to ask, like, if we could hear one of the versions that they didn't end up going with. That just sounds fascinating.
I don't know if I still have it. I gotta find it. It's buried on a hard. I know I have it somewhere. I have to find it, but and I don't even think. Like, I'm trying to think how I did. I think I might have. I don't remember if I even like legit got the stem, because Russell Mulcahy, because he did all the Duran Duran videos and he knew all those guys, and so like he was like, oh no, we'll do this, and I don't remember what it was some rights issue, like they didn't want to do it. I don't remember exactly what the reason was. I remember. I don't want to tell tales out of school here. I remember there was like a friend of the band's that did a version of it, and it did a version of the remix. And then I was like, well, I'm going to do my own version. And then like, so I got real competitive, and then, I remember Jeff and Russell dug the version that I did. And then for whatever reason, we ended up not going that way. It's much better than we did.
I remember I heard it because I remember being I remember being at the Post facility that was right across the street from MTV for season 1, where all the editors were, and I think it might have been even in Alyssa Clark's bay, where she showed like it was like a mock-up of what the title sequence could be. It was like I think they just threw together like stuff they found on the internet and just turned it into something, but it had the song, and I thought it sounded fantastic. But then
where was that, on Colorado, or was that on? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It was right across. Yeah. Cause you just walked across the street from the MTV building, and there was that little building that you wouldn't realize was a Post facility. And there's all the editors were upstairs and it was all
right next to Yahoo, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. That's where I met all the Post people. And I actually, this has nothing to do with the score, but I borrowed Blaine's mouse pad and I never gave it back. And I actually still have that mouse pad. It was just a wonderful little like prayer rug mouse pad. Wow. Let's call Blaine and tell him that this happened. And
we're gonna narc.
Deserved well.
Good news, buddy. I know 2021 hasn't been great so far, but we got your mouse pad.
Exactly. Bringing it back. So yeah.
We all live in a dystopian hellscape, but we do have your mouse pad. So
we do have the mouse pad. So I'll see if I can.
Everything's looking up.
Things are looking up. So
yeah, we're looking good. You can't get a shot in LA if you're under 65, but we got a mouse pad for you.
There you go.
So at least you won't be scratching your computer table. That's what matters.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed as we've been doing our rewatch and just going through everything that there in the first season, there was kind of the outro music. They kind of just played over the credits, and then it changed later on, I believe, for season 2. And was there maybe a reason for that, or was it just through the evolution of finding the sound of the show?
I don't. You know what? I don't remember. I honestly don't remember.
It's like when Kate or Calissa or someone asked me, it's like, oh, well, how'd you do this thing? And the writer was like, it's all a blur. I don't know. It's all one giant writer's room where
there were Post-its, I think, but I don't.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't know. We had a whiteboard and we wrote some stuff down and then it was in the episode. That's just kind of how it happened.
I mean, so much is I remember one time we stayed up it was me and 2 other guys who were working at the studio. We were up for like 30 hours or 33 hours. And like I had this studio in Burbank behind the Burbank airport. And this was season 4. And we were working on the finale. And I remember that the power kept going out in the studio. And I ended up bringing an electrician out because the guy who owned the studio was out of town. And he was like, look, I don't know what's happening in this studio, but he's like, somebody is drawing a shit ton of current in this building. And because I was looking at the current meter, and it was like there was way too much current being drawn for another composer like with a computer. And what ended up happening was that we had in the back of the building there was like a marijuana grow operation that they hadn't told any of us about. So the whole time we had been at the studio, when the air conditioning would come on, we would get headaches, and it would kind of smell like weed. And I always thought man, who's smoking weed in here? And I remember I would talk to the other guys and be like, man, look, can you just smoke outside? Because it's coming into my room. And I remember calling one of the guys and be like, hey man, can you not smoke anyway? And so he's like, I don't smoke in the building and blah, blah. And it turned out that there was these guys running a grow operation that nobody told us about. And it got into this weird thing where I remember screaming at the guy who owned the studio. I was like, I don't give a shit who's back there. I said, I've still got 20 minutes of music to finish, for a very homoerotic scene. And if you don't get somebody out here to fix this right now, I'm going to have a K9 team down here in the morning. I don't give a shit if Pablo Escobar is in the back of that thing. And it was just that was very par for the course. I didn't none of us gave a shit. All we were doing was just working and getting this stuff done. So I don't remember a lot.
So some of the season 4 scores might have been written in a little bit of an accidental weed haze. Absolutely. Is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Cut, print, that's it.
That's it. That's all you need.
Well, what I'm trying to say is we were high as the whole time.
Whatever it takes, because you're talking about 30-hour days and all that. I mean, TV production is crushing. The schedule is crushing, and it's just once that someone presses the start button, there's no stopping. It's you don't stop for anything. And it's just, well, you've got minutes of music to write. We've got pages to write. It's well, you either do it or, we have nothing. And then you're still spending thousands upon thousands of dollars a day for people to wait around. And it's well, you can't do that. And it's a crushing schedule, but I, for me, at least, it's ultimately worthwhile just because it was so much fun. At the end of the day, it sucked a lot.
I think it was a show that was, I forgot who said it. I think one of our editors said it to me, and I don't remember which one, but that it's really a show that was so much better than it ever deserved to be. Like, it was this show that was on MTV, that was not a network, that was known for scripted television. And, a lot of times we had a very limited budget, not enough time and resource. I mean, you can see like, some of the CG in the first season, that monster that comes out at the end of the first season, but it's like, it didn't like, it was a show where everybody wanted it to be really good, and we would kill ourselves like trying to make this thing. Like, it was like we were making Lawrence of Arabia every week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this, silly show about werewolves. I mean, it wasn't a show about werewolves, but it was, this show, like, we all cared. And I still care about it. Like, I still feel like very strongly about the show. And we were all really, we would like gripe and like, oh, it's schedule and blah, blah, like, but like we would all just do it. And part of it was because like it came from the top. Like, Jeff never took a break ever. Like, and I knew that if I was working hard, Jeff was working 5 times as hard as me. And I'd always just kind of suck it up and be like, oh, all right, well.
Yeah, Jeff is definitely
just do it.
Yeah, he's a lead from the front type of boss, where it's not the type of thing where it's like, it's like, oh, go shoot the scene or this. I'm going to be in my office doing whatever. He's like, no, he's on set right next to you making it happen, or he's in the spotting sessions, or he's in the editor's bay. Because I remember like so many days where it's like the writers were at the table and we're breaking story, and it's just, it got to certain points where it's like, we get Jeff 3 times today. He will come once in the morning, once at noon, and once in the evening. And it's just because he's being pulled in so many different directions and all that. And it was definitely, I mean, if you feel like, it's like, God, I worked so hard today, I don't know how I did it. It's like, well, Jeff probably worked about 4 times harder than you today doing it. So it was never it never felt like we were the ones working hard. It's like, he's working so hard, and that makes you work even harder because, he's so committed to it. And it's like, we all wanted the show to be so good. And you're right. I mean, I've told this story before, but it's like, I remember seeing the first commercial for Teen Wolf, and I was like, this looks pretty stupid. It's just a Twilight ripoff. It can't possibly be good. And then I got hired on the show, and I read all the scripts for the first season, and I was like, this makes no sense that it's good. Like, it has no right to be as good as it is on MTV. And I feel like that was a lot of people's experience with it, where they're just like, oh, Teen Wolf, oh, I know exactly what I'm getting. And then you work on it, or you watch it, or you read it, and you're like, I had no clue what I was getting. And yeah.
I was just going to say, like, I feel like the passion of the cast and crew really came through when watching it. Like, that everyone was very dedicated to making it the best show that it could be. Everybody
was really trying hard to make the show, as good as it could be. And it's, and it has, I think the fact that it really found an audience that was like well beyond its target demographic. Like, I have a friend who's my age who told me that it was easier for him to come out as a gay man than it was for him to come out as a Teen Wolf fan. Because he was, I remember he was working at Fox at the time, and, he was just, but like, he loved the show, like genuinely loved it. And it was just, I think for a lot of people, it sort of started out as maybe a guilty pleasure that then they really kind of got involved in it. And it was cool to see it. And it's cool to see, for me to see that, for a lot of people, it had a really positive impact on their life. And a lot of kids who were, I know that there was, there's a lot of, the kids in the LGBTQ community who kind of latched onto it and felt like they saw some representation. And it's like, those things were like, that stuff is never perfect. They're like that. Like, I am fully aware of places in the show where there could have been more representation. And it's like, but like the positive things that the show was able to connect with people on, I'm still really proud of that. That kids who didn't have, because I remember what it was like to be like a kid and not like, I mean, I was like I'm the most represented. I'm a straight white dude. Like, there's nobody who's more represented than me, but like, it's not that hard to be a straight white dude, but like, but just to be, even being a kid, I remember being a kid, and it's just, everything is like, to see yourself reflected, that's a big deal. And for a lot of kids, I think even at the time when Teen Wolf came out, like that was actually a lot more representation. I think that like, it's easy to forget that was only 10 years ago, but like that, that at that time, that was a lot more representation. That was a bigger deal than it is now. So, it's still, I think that's, anyway, I'm talking about shit I don't know about. I'm just saying it was nice when you would see those things, like especially kids who kind of latched onto it and felt like they had something there to grab onto. That was always a cool thing. So sorry, I don't sleep a lot.
And definitely Jeff fought for a lot of that stuff too, because we talked to him for this podcast, and he talked about a few scenes that MTV was like trying to find a say to him, this scene is too gay, without saying this scene is too gay, and him basically being like, well, I'm going to do it though. So, get used to it. And it shows, I mean, perfect or not, it is doing something very special.
Yeah. And I think that, and when I say it's not perfect, that's not in any way to take away from what Jeff accomplished. I'm just saying it's like, whenever we look back, whenever you look back, like you can always see like, well, there's other things that, like, and it's like, there was, people had, critiques of, of things, representationally that they felt, could have been different on the show. And I'm not ignoring that when I say, I'm just saying it's like the things that the show did well. I think, I remember Jeff saying that like one of the things that he wanted was to have a show where, there were gay characters that were just gay characters. It wasn't like, the gay kid, and they were, and he did that really well. And it's, again, like it doesn't seem like as much of a big deal now, but at the time it was a big deal, and it was a big deal that it wasn't a big deal on the show. So I thought that was always, cool how that was handled on the show.
Well, we did want to ask if you had any new projects that you wanted to talk a little bit about.
Why?
Talked a lot about Teen Wolf, but if you wanted to talk about some other stuff you're working on, we'd be really interested in that too.
I'm working on a show on Netflix. It's called Dota, Dragon's Blood, and I'm very excited about that show. We've been having a lot of fun doing it. It's with Ashley Edward Miller, who was one of the writers on Thor Ragnarok, and I worked with him on a show called Lore, that was on Amazon.
Yeah.
And we actually didn't meet until after the show was done, but I met him. And we ended up, he said, "Hey, I'm doing this show on Netflix. I think that, you might be good for." And so it was a period of like a year that we kind of went back and forth and talked about it. And, but when it finally came together, we were able to do it. And it's been a blast. It's been a lot of fun. So the way I describe the show is if you took ayahuasca and then binge watched Game of Thrones and old episodes of heavy metal back to back. So if you like,
that's a wild combination.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Like high magic, graphic violence, and elf sex. Then it's I know.
Say no more.
Say no more.
So, and I think it's at least worth a curse review.
Absolutely.
So it's cool. It's another show with like a very dedicated fandom, because it comes from a video game title that has a huge user base all over the world. So I'm interested to see how they react to the show. So, sure. But yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
Excellent.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Well, I'm really underslept, so please, when you're editing this, can you not make me look stupid or like?
This has been fantastic.
A really fun interview.
This has been so good.
Don't let me say anything that's gonna get me in trouble. I hope I didn't say anything stupid that'll get me in trouble.
Absolutely
I don't want to get. I don't want to have to buy an apartment in Pennsylvania. I don't want to.
It's like, I'm so happy that we were able to sit down and talk about a show that we all love and that so many people still love. As we've been pulling the podcast together and talking to people and figuring out who we can talk to about the show and all that. It's just that everyone has been excited to do it. Like no one has been like, I don't know, really. It's always been like, yes, I want to talk about this thing that we got to do that people still love. And it's just been fantastic. Well, it's been wonderful having Dino Meneghin, the fantastic composer for Teen Wolf, on the episode with us, and we couldn't be happier. We couldn't be happier to have had the chance to talk to you, Dino, and we really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys so much. It was lovely, Kate and Calissa. Lovely to meet you guys.
Great meeting you too.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
It's been such a great conversation. Learned a lot more about the composing side of it. It's just been really wonderful.
Yeah, that's
absolutely
great.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dino, and hopefully we'll be talking to you again
great
soon.
To see you.
Yes, great to see you too. Have a wonderful night and good luck with the new baby.
With getting some sleep, maybe.
And yes, get some sleep. Yes.
Yeah,
we hope.
Not that lucky.
All
right.
All right. Bye, Dino.
Bye.
All right, Wolfies. That wraps up the beta section for Pack Mentality. And now we're about to dive into spoilers, not just for this episode, but for the whole Teen Wolf series. If you want to stay spoiler-free for all of the excellent stories to come, jump out now, and we'll catch you next week. But if this isn't your first time in Beacon Hills and you want to hear more, don't move a muscle. Here comes the Alpha.
It's called an Alpha. It's the most dangerous of our kind. You and I, we're betas. This thing is more powerful, more animal than either of us.
I forgot how much of a fail wolf Scott was at the start of the show. It's easy to forget his struggles with him, becoming a true alpha by the end of it. It's just really easy to forget that he really didn't do a great job there, taking on his wolfy abilities at the start of the show.
You know what would have been really cute when they introduced Liam is if once he turns, Scott just goes up to him and pushes over just a little wide ruled notebook, and on the cover it says lycanthropy for beginners.
And
that would be great.
Or maybe
spelled wrong.
I was gonna say it starts out like, and then it's just crossed out, and then it says being werewolf. And he's like, I made this. It's for you. And it has all his little notes and stuff in it.
I would love
actually
that.
would have been cute.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a really cute idea. That would have been great callback.
Let's go back to it. Refilm that episode.
Yes, let's refilm that episode, get everyone back together, refilm it, and just
get the band back together for it.
Put in that little bit of a joke.
This is the start of Peter taking revenge on everyone involved in the hailfire. What do you guys think about the death of the bus driver, knowing the reasoning behind it?
He low-key deserved it. Maybe not quite death penalty, but he low-key deserved it.
Was it low-key?
I mean, he was part of it, so...
Yeah, I just said so he technically didn't kill anyone, but accessory after the fact, when you know that an entire family, including children, has been murdered, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
That's bad.
It is pretty bad.
You should feel bad.
Yeah.
You are a bad person.
And he dies of guilt.
He does.
And internal bleeding.
Right.
And internal bleeding.
It's a combination of factors.
Yes, I feel like it is kind of, like a 70-30 guilt, internal bleeding thing.
His organs were leaching guilt into his bloodstream.
Yes, exactly. Derek goes to see him and he just dies. He dies of guilt. It's like, I'm sorry, and then flatline.
But at least he got to see a beautiful face as he died.
Oh,
That's
there
true.
You go.
That's true.
That's very true.
But I think seeing Derek is what caused, the extra secretion of guilt.
Jackson really needles Scott in this episode. How do you guys feel about his character at the start of the show, knowing more later on about his backstory?
We get good backstory on him later and all that at the parent-teacher conference and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't justify, I do think the fact that he's adopted and has this, based on what his dad says. I mean, we don't actually get any verbalization of this from Jackson, but his dad says that Jackson has this need to prove himself, to prove that he belongs there, that he should be there. And and they're in quotes being in this family, that just because he was adopted into it, it's based on what his dad says in that one scene. I think that's the only time we ever see his parents. Seems like his parents are just like, that's our son. That's all you really get from it. But Jackson's like, I'm their adopted son. It feels like that's what he's got in his head a lot. So he's just pushing himself to prove that he deserves their love, I guess, or whatever, when it seems like he's already got it, like, which makes him a tragic figure. So I feel like all of that, I get a little bit of the asshole stuff. It doesn't excuse it in any way. I mean, you can have a hard life and be a pretty good person and not just be a complete piece of shit. But with Scott, he's just like, why don't you like me? Like, what did I do?
Like, what's your problem?
Yeah, like, what's your problem? Because later on in the episode, he's like, we can totally be friends. It's like it's a total Aang and Zuko moment from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where Aang is like, we could totally be friends. We don't have to be enemies.
It's great.
And this is foreshadowing for episode 201.
Advertisements later.
Yes. But for episode 201, when at the beginning of that episode, there's the homeless guy on campus. And I think Jackson does give him money or something.
That doesn't sound right.
No, it doesn't sound right. But for some reason, I thought...
I don't think that's right.
He wasn't completely awful to him. Like, I think he was...
I don't recall this. So.
It doesn't matter.
I thought you were going to say it was foreshadowing to, since this is in the spoilers section, that it was foreshadowing to Jackson becoming the Kanema, because his complete lack of empathy and his inability to act in a way that, acknowledges other people's feelings and well-being, that's what turns him into the Kanema, instead of turning him into your good old-fashioned lycanthrope.
Yeah. No.
He becomes a aware snake person, which I guess is what happens when you're a dick and you get the bite. You become aware snake.
So yeah, that is something.
Lizard.
Yes, that is something very interesting, Kate, because I think it was the intro episode, when you were talking about just the different facets to the mythology that's created for Teen Wolf and all that. And I think it's very interesting that you can bite someone, a werewolf can bite someone, but that doesn't mean they become a werewolf. It means it just unlocks something inside of you that either is or isn't there, but that doesn't mean you're going to become a werewolf yourself. I
don't think I've ever seen another supernatural series that does that. Handles it.
I can't think of one where that happens, where you have a vampire, let's say, bite someone and then they become a Bigfoot.
Yeah. Like, I've seen where, the bite maybe doesn't take vampire, werewolf, whatever, and the person dies, but never they turn into something else.
Right. Yeah. Because that's usually how it is, like in those stories where if a monster bites you, you either die or live. And if you live, you become the thing. But it's never been, well, if you live, you'll be something maybe, where it's like it's not a foregone conclusion. Is that discussed in season 2, where they're like, where Derek's like, I totally bit that asshole, not that asshole, but his side.
Wow.
And he's like, but he didn't become a werewolf. And does he?
Abomination? Is that what you're talking about?
He becomes an abomination. But I still remember. Do y'all remember? Does that get discussed?
Abomination is the name of the episode. That's what she's saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yes. I think everyone just assumes Derek had to be the one to bite him because Derek's the only alpha.
Right.
What he thinks he's going to get
down as scared and horny. That's actually Jackson's expression in that scene.
Yeah. It actually is.
Well, honestly, the very beginning of 201 is this fantastic shot of Jackson emerging out of the water with his shirt artfully torn. And it's like, how come all the sexy guys get bitten right on the side where it's like super sexy when you turn around and look at it? And it hurts, but you don't want it to make it look like it hurts because you're so...
Okay, but where could they be bitten on those magnificent bodies that wouldn't be sexy?
That's accurate.
Bite him on the ass cheek. That still looks sexy.
That's true.
That's so toned.
That just means someone bit you on the ass cheek.
Yeah. I
fail to see how that's a problem.
There's no way that's not sexy.
Everyone on the show is so attractive that there is no wrong place to bite them and for them not to be like, oh God, it looks so sexy right now. Although, I guess it's just maybe the intention in this.
I guess. Oh no.
I guess. Because Lydia doesn't look sexy after she's bitten.
But she is bitten in the same place.
She is bitten in the same place. You're right. Well, why didn't Derek just lift up his arm and go, I'm just going to bite you right there? But or what I like to imagine is when he jumps down. It's like what happens is because you see Derek like he opens his mouth and goes in to bite and we cut to black or whatever. I think what happens is Jackson goes, oh wait, hold on a second. And then he artfully ripped his own shirt and then just kind of presented his hip and was like, okay, go for it. And then Derek was like, this is weird. I mean, he just does it anyway. He's like, get the out of here. So.
just get out of what's left of my house.
And
please.
then Jackson, like, dramatically ran through the woods on his own and came to the river, just dove in.
Yeah.
That all sounds very real.
It all sounds like that's exactly what would happen.
This.
He's basically Peter.
Like Derek, he would have been so good for Peter's pack, right?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
That would have been spot on.
They would have been each trying to outmood each other. Like when it comes to stuff like that, when they're like hunting down like people they're trying to attack and all that, like they're both trying to be super moody and cool about it, but they cheat. They're basically the supernatural creatures in Zoolander, where they're having the walk off, between Zoolander and other character played by Owen Wilson, whose name I can't remember. But it's like with supernatural stuff.
I feel like they would actually like wingman each other because they're looking at different age brackets. So I feel like there'd actually be like, I feel like Jackson would be like, okay, I'm going to transform. Hold this mirror so I can watch myself transform. And Peter would be like, okay, man. Okay, but I'm next. And he'd hold it. And then like they'd switch. And then Peter would watch himself transform. And then I just feel like there's the opportunity for a spinoff show that's like an alternate universe where Peter bites Jackson and they just become this like horrible, totally unempathetic, self-centered, self-worshipping duo who just go places, insult people, and bring home hotties. Like that's just
I would watch that.
I would watch
that right now.
You mentioned that mirror. Do you think Peter left that big old mirror in the burned out Hale house in case he ever transformed there? He could watch himself.
Probably.
Yes.
He bought it from Beacon Hills Crossing and he just brought this mirror with him. He's like, if I ever transform here, I'll get to see myself as we so hot. Yeah.
I want to go back to something we talked about in the beta section. Despite the fact that I think he could have easily manipulated poor Scott, Derek never lies to him. He always tells Scott the truth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I mean, think about even like at the end of the season, when Scott's like, will you help me protect Allison? He's like, no, why would I do that?
That's true.
He's like, he's not like, yeah, totally. Just help me get out of these chains and I'll definitely do that for you. He's just like, no, I don't see why that should be my responsibility. Her whole family hates me. They keep trying to murder me, including her. I'm just going to not
chained up to this wall.
Yeah. So I'm not really going to like volunteer to like take a bullet for your girlfriend. I don't know why you're asking me to.
Yeah.
He does. He is very infuriating. Totally agree. But he's not a liar. He doesn't lie about stuff.
No, you're absolutely right. You're right.
And even, later when they're like, are you going to bite Boyd? He's like, yeah, because he said he wanted me to. So I'm gonna, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
he asked politely. Why would I not do that? That would be rude of me, actually.
Right. He said, please, Scott, please.
That goes a long way in the werewolf community, Scott.
He's used to dealing with Scott, who's not very polite to him at all.
That's true. Like Kate said, he just runs in accusatorily, and then everyone else is like, hey, Derek, you want to hang out? And he's like, what? Oh, okay.
Wait, that was a sincere question? I thought you were going to punch me at the end.
No.
Oh.
So.
We were talking earlier about transformations. Let's go back to that.
Yeah.
It's really, really great.
And it connects to what Derek says in the second season, which is that the shape you take reflects the person you are. And so several of the characters that we know, they get the bite or undergo some kind of transformation and become, it takes them a while to get control of it, but ultimately they become more themselves.
Right.
Jackson becomes the Kanema because that's the sort of shitty person he is. But Lydia becomes a Banshee because, well, also there's a history of it in her family. But also, she does ultimately, through that, become more herself, too. Right. So the bite is a gift, but it's also a key, like what you said earlier, that unlocks a part of yourself that you might not have really had access to before.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I definitely feel like Lydia is the clearest example of that the bite, she was already well on her way. Well, no, she wasn't, but the bite just unlocking you,
yes,
like just the potential, the supernatural potential in your body, so that coupled with her own personal journey of stripping away all of these bindings that she placed on herself because she believed wrongly, but believed that, that nobody was going to accept her for the real her. And, and so to finally, and that's, what we get in season 4 or 5 or whatever, like when she finally comes into all of her power and all of that. She's like the most powerful super on the show and all that. It's just fantastic because it's such a great journey. I feel like all the characters on the show have fantastic journey. Every time we meet a character, I think we get an immediate sense of who they are and kind of what their fatal flaw is. And I think who they could be. There's definitely a mirror image to each of them. Like when we see Isaac, when we first meet Isaac with his awful, terrible, no good, abusive father, that it's just like he kind of just reverts back to that child because that's all he's known from his dad. But the mirror image of that is confident and just belief in himself. Of course, granted, it goes too far, and that's kind of the story of season 2 with Derek's pack is that Isaac and
Erica,
they become their better selves, but they take it too far. And I feel like that makes sense because it's like the first time you drink or you find a drink that you like, maybe you drink too much type of thing, where it's like they finally are not, in Isaac's case, they're not powerless anymore. That's it. That's perfect. They're not powerless anymore, but then they become drunk on the power. So it's like they kind of become the right person they're supposed to be, but then just keep going when they should have stopped. And that's what makes next season's arc so great for these characters and for Derek, where he's trying to build this pack to not let bad things happen anymore. And then awful bad things just keep happening because, well, we've already talked about all that stuff. But it's fantastic. I definitely think we on the show did a very fantastic job of introducing characters, and we immediately know who they are, again, kind of what their fatal flaw is and who they could be, that you can already see in them what that journey is supposed to be for the character. And then whether or not they actually get there or how long it takes to get there or how terrible that journey ends up being, how terrible that journey can end up being will be. But I think we did a pretty good job of that. And I think Lydia is a great distillation of the entire series. And
one of the clearest examples.
Very clear. Just very clear from start to finish. Like there's really no muddy water on any of that with her. And it's fantastic. So.
Right.
This episode, I feel like we get a stronger sense of how bold Allison can be. She sneaks out of her house. She tells Scott to think about her naked. This is her feeling more like an Argent as we know them, and far from the girly girl she worries about being.
They're just like super intense people who had like a super intense child, sort of, who's going to be learning all that intensity.
She gets unlocked too. This like really deeply buried, not badass, because she is a badass from very early on. See also parkouring out of her bedroom window.
So much flipping.
But this like really intense aggression really is unlocked in Allison.
Yeah, it's definitely, and that's great because that does come in season 2. And I do feel like a theme of that season is power and powerlessness, because at the end of the season, Allison's going to get put in some pretty tough spots, because of supernatural creatures. And that kind of harkens back to a scene in the pilot when she says, I cried like a girly girl or something. And she says like, I thought I wasn't that type of person. And then it's like season 2 is like, I'm not that type of person. And I'm going to learn how to use these knives. I'm going to stab the shit out of so many werewolves. And but it just seems like you're right, that unlocking of Allison happens. It's like everyone on the show gets unlocked in some sense, whether they're supernatural characters or human characters. And it's fantastic.
One of the through lines I feel like of Teen Wolf as a show is what people do when they have power and what people do when they feel powerless.
Right.
That's a big part of really the whole show. And a lot of the characters, the worst decisions that they make them when they feel powerless, because it's just one of the hardest feelings to survive and still be able to think clearly. And we see that with almost every character. Yeah. When they make a really bad decision, it's usually because they feel powerless. And we especially see that, I think, in the second season with Derek and the betas, especially Erica and Isaac, who are really angry people and are really used to feeling powerless in different ways. And so when they get some semblance of power, they just can't handle it, really. Yeah. They suddenly all this like bitterness and resentment from when they felt powerless is just unleashed on the world. But it's fascinating to watch. So there's that.
Yeah, it's a good story because it's it's incredibly relatable, not the werewolves and supernatural power parts, but obviously those parts aren't supposed to be relatable. But what is
I relate to that
relatable-
part as well.
I'm glad that worked for you. But the thing that is relatable is that we all have felt powerless in our lives, and we've all imagined taking power so that we're not powerless, and of course Teen Wolf just turns again that up to 11. But the problem is that that's not always the best mentality to have with power, because then bad things will happen, that it's like, because you've overcompensate a little bit, and then in their case they're monsters, and monsters are strong and have claws and teeth and all that type of stuff, so it just doesn't really work out, unfortunately. But I can't wait for us to get to it and talk about it more, because it's a good season. It's just, every season is a good season, but it's a good season. So I hope everyone listening had a great time with this episode, and we will see y'all next week for episode 104 titled
Magic Bullet.
Nice. Oh, that's right.
One of my favorite episodes, and the birthplace of a beautiful ship.
Steric River.
Oh, yes. So
Will was like, ships?
Ships? I like tall ships, all the sails and rudders.
Such a nerd when it comes to actual ships.
It's true. It's true. I should have been a sailor in another life. But yes, so next week we're going to watch season 1, episode 4, Magic Bullet. And this is a slight spoiler, but we're going to meet an interesting new character next week. And it's going to crack open the story a little bit wider. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And I can't wait for all of you to meet her. I don't know why I put a question mark at that.
I don't either.
I don't know. But yes, I can't wait for all of you to meet her.
And that concludes this week's episode of Return to Beacon Hills. We hope you had as much fun listening as we did talking about all things Teen Wolf. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RTBH Podcast, as well as on Tumblr and TikTok at Return to Beacon Hills. If you'd like to ask us questions or offer suggestions for future topics to discuss, you can email us at returntobeaconhills@gmail.com. Don't forget to find us at patreon.com/RTBH Podcast for more awesome exclusives. Join us here next week for our look at season 1, episode 4, Magic Bullet, and listen to us have a great discussion with Laura Webb, the music supervisor for Teen Wolf. Rate and review us on iTunes. 5-star reviews get a shout out. Have a great week, and we'll see you again soon on Return to Beacon Hills.
Dude, it's Beacon Hills.